like to make this session as, at least on a text basis, as interactive as possible. And with that, let me share my screen and welcome you all to Don't Wait for Failure. And talking where we explore how to steer your transformation by using early signals. If that wasn't the webinar that you signed up for, hopefully that you can stick around anyway. I'm sure you'll learn something. So for introductions, my name is Bob Turnus. I handle both enterprises and partners here at LAI. And over a long career in the Agile space, as well as transformations, I love sitting at that space, that intersection of tools, process, and good intent to improve organizations and the lives of the people who work for them. And with Mike, I'll give you a moment for an introduction.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mike McCall. I'm president and founder of LAI, Lean Agile Intelligence. We are a assessment, measurement, and improvement platform. I was very fortunate to be introduced to Agile very while back and been helping organizations with change for about 15 years now. I'm passionate about creating healthy organizations and healthy teams and using data to do that.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. So let's bring us to our learning objectives for our session today. And thanks to those who dropped the kind of your why or their reason for attending into the chat. It's so interesting to know why this topic was so resonant. We had tons of registrations and lots of interest on LinkedIn. So as far as our learning objectives, we'd like to explore the causes of transformation failure. We want to talk about how behaviors can be made visible. And then finally, and we'll anchor deeply on the power of qualitative metrics and how they can indicate early signals. So as a bit of housekeeping here or semantics, the what? What is transformation? Transformation is the continuous evolution of how work is done, value is delivered, and teams improving. It's an ongoing journey, and improving never stops. So this applies, folks, to any transformation. This is for lean, this is for agile, for safe, Scrum, project to product, or just plain old catch-all digital transformation. And, the name of our company is Lean Agile Intelligence. And while the majority of our IP, it's geared towards those disciplines, we've seen our underlying assessment engine used for just about every technology-oriented functional area or discipline. Mike, when you made this tool 8 years ago, I'm sure you were not thinking about its use as a means to assess security or what have you. And so it's been neat to see, again, our framework be adapted to different purposes. There are even some folks on this call whom I've seen adapt LAI into really neat contexts. So back to this topic of transformation, though, we all know that transformation is an ongoing thing. And so, by the way, if you're one of the people who treats transformation as a one and done thing, actually, maybe this webinar isn't for you, but it's kind of a light joke. Hopefully you stick around anyway. So why are organizations transforming? They're seeing a ton of external drivers. They're seeing competitive pressures, both internal and external. They're seeing customer expectations that move on ever faster cycles. There's an ever, customers require or want solutions almost instantaneously. The days of selecting something from a catalog and waiting 2 weeks for it to arrive are done. Like I broke a perfume bottle of my daughter on Saturday, and within seconds we had selected a replacement and it was on order. And I just want to point out that ordering something from Amazon is actually more effective than Kleenex at drying up your daughter's tears. And so both from customer expectations as well as the technology that enables that, right? You got to go faster. Now, globalization is an interesting one. It's a particularly interesting topic these days. And so whether it's the shortening of supply chains or anything that creates that smaller globe, it removes the insulation that allowed some markets to react more slowly. And if I missed any external driver, I think it's good enough to say that these are all causes for rapid market changes. We're seeing that same thing within organizations as well. We see pressures to transform, including siloed structures and lack of strategic alignment. These are two of what could be a much longer list. And so hopefully this isn't giving anybody in the audience a light panic attack, but I'm sure that we've all experienced these as drivers for the types of transformations that we've been a part of or supported. So, in spite of all of these challenges and drivers, enterprises still want all of the outcomes that keep them alive. They want to go faster. They want to be more adaptive, call it business agility or otherwise. They want to have more customer centricity. You've seen that in SAFe and otherwise. They want to be more efficient with their spend. They want better engagement, internal and external, customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. And finally, they want their product, what they sell, to be reliable. And so how are they doing this? And we've leaned on that old mental model of people, process, and technology. One shorthand for people are the behaviors that they perform. And process often shows up in our context as frameworks, potentially process docs, or even tribal knowledge. Like here's an example of tribal knowledge. Like we do it a certain way because that's what leadership expects. And absent of a formal process, we're going to continue to do things that way, well, because we like our jobs and that's what leadership wants. So process, whether it's an unspoken conversation or something very formal, exists for our organizations. And finally, technology represents the tools, end user applications, and system level hardware and software, and even the devices connecting an increasingly remote workforce. And in the lean and agile space, we know these as Jira and PlanView, Rally, ADO, etc. And so for all of the emphasis that all of the reasons that we're all here in this webinar, for all of the effort that organizations are placing into people and process and technology, how are transformations going? And Mike, I was wondering, do I ask for a drum roll here? Is it the Jaws theme? And what's that song in Star Wars before Darth Vader walks out? Those transformations, the metrics are terrible. We put together this slide and it's kind of lightly scathing, right? Bain says that 30% of digital transformations succeed. The other side of that coin from McKinsey is that 70% out of 100, right, of those transformations fail. Bain has even more pessimistic views on transformation, saying that 88% fail to achieve original ambitions. Now, I look at these metrics and with a bit of kind of cynicism and realism, realizing that large organizations or consulting shops, they're selling safe transformation. So even if these are maybe a little bit different, they're still very directionally correct. And what are the causes for this, right? Well, Boston calls it out, BCG calls it out. One of the key factors for transformation success is embedding cross-functional, mission-oriented, fail fast, learn, behavioral change, bolded for a reason, across the wider organization. McKinsey says that 72%, rounding, or more specific, of companies with failed transformation programs identify employee resistance and bolded behavior as the major barrier. No surprise that there's a consistent theme, and that Bain says transformation requires critical changes to corporate behaviors. And Mike, I'm going to stop sharing here and pass this over to you.
Thanks, Bob. Share. All right. Well, thanks, Bob. Thanks for telling the narrative. So we go back to the iceberg. I'm sure many of you change agents out here have seen this before, and it's a really good metaphor to help explain transformation, right? Where most transformation efforts will focus on the visible elements, those above the surface, okay? Such as process, the operation piece of this, the operating model, the practices, the frameworks, etc. And then the technology, the enabler, the tools, the platforms that help enable this work. These are they're visible because a couple reasons. One, they're easier to control. Tech, whether you're onboarding a new platform or you're rolling out a new process, there's some policy changes, but it goes through essentially a process to actually stand these things up. And they're very easy to wrap your head around, if you will, because they're tangible, right? They're there. It's something that we can track and we can measure. For example, hey, we've had 10 teams go through our Scrum Dojo. And so it's something that you can actually show quick wins with. And it's what we all lean on, given that it's visible and tangible. But where the metaphor really hits home is just like the iceberg, the most dangerous part of transformations is what you can't see. Okay. It's that people aspect. And when we're talking about people today, we're really talking about their behaviors, the cultural aspect, the beliefs, the attitudes, the mindsets that we talk a lot about. And what you tend to encounter there is a resistance to change, right? People have been doing things for a long time. They don't like change. Okay. Toxic behaviors, perhaps a lack of communication, a lack of accountability, and then misalignment, right? Maybe not always keeping the corporate goals in mind and working in silos for more of your own gain. So things start to become really complex here and hard. And it's often why the behavioral piece is ignored. But we just saw in the stats that it can't be ignored. It's actually one of the main drivers of failure of these transformations. So when we talk about an example, right? And Bob had those outcomes, and one of the examples is, hey, we need speed. We need to get to market faster. We need to beat our competitors to the market with new products, right? It's something that every organization in today's digital economy needs to do. It is an outcome that wants to be achieved as part of any transformation where your operating model enables speed. Right. So when you look from the change lever standpoint, right, from a process perspective, let's talk about that first. Value stream formation, value streams are very popular today, right? And that focuses on, hey, let's not organize people around their function, but instead let's organize people around the value they provide, which makes a lot of sense. But this is a process change. The technology piece of that, we're seeing PlanView, a big player in the market, which really focuses on, it's a platform that helps organizations focus on flow. How fast are we getting value out to the market? And ultimately, the way that organizations are measuring this, because they have to be able to measure the impact, right? So I have an outcome, I'm going to pull some change levers and ultimately measure the impact. They're using cycle time, right? And that cycle time, for those who don't know, is the total amount of time it takes for any work item to move from a start of a process to completion, right? And hopefully that completion is delivery, if you're in the software world, delivery of a product to production. Now, the missing piece here that we see in organizations, and again, validated by the studies, is that the people aspect isn't addressed up front, right? Because it's hard. That's one of the main reasons of why these aren't addressed. How do you, it's not tangible. You can't see it, right? It's complex. But when you talk about, hey, I need speed, you need to consider, we need to make decisions fast. How quick are we able to make a decision so we can continue to enable our teams? We need to be able to collaborate across silos. Do we have the same alignment, right? Do we have the same priorities? Okay. They're difficult conversations a lot of times. And then finally, are we being transparent about what's going on in our teams? What work is in flight? Are things coming through the side door that maybe aren't as important to others? So these are the things and the lever that typically is not pulled, really because it's hard, right? It's also not tangible, and therefore it's tough to measure. And we're going to get into a little bit about that on how you can help mitigate that risk and actually have a solution that makes the invisible visible. So how do we help transformations agents pull that behavior lever? Like I've been in the transformation business for 20 years, right? This is very much our mission at LAI, is to enable the the transformation leaders that have the same passions that we do about creating great work environments, right? That are creating value for a customer, helping you achieve your organization mission. So for us, we want to enable you to do that. And so within LAI, Lean Agile Intelligence, we're a bit of a data nerd, right? And so as we continue to move forward in this space, right, in driving change, and because we know the behavioral aspect is such a challenge, we want to help you make it visible. We want to help you make what's under the surface of that iceberg. How do we spring that up? How do we shine a light on that so that you can have really meaningful conversations about, here are some frictions that may be impeding our outcomes, right? So you got to make that visible. And the way you make things visible ultimately, right, is through measurement. And because behaviors are, and let's get specific about the definition, they're specific, observable, and repeatable actions. Okay, so when we talk about behaviors, specific, observable, repeatable actions, interesting enough, that actually makes it pretty easy to measure, right? So we have this intangible, complex, people-driven component of transformation that, because they're behaviors, we can actually measure them, okay? And so when we talk about measured behaviors, we're actually talking about qualitative metrics. And what we mean by qualitative metrics is it's the ability to measure an attribute, a quality, a characteristic of something that can't be numerically quantified. Okay, right? So when you look at the things above the surface, the tangible components, the technology, the processes, you can measure those things, right? But when you look at the things underneath, okay, they could be measured, but in a much qualitative way, right? And so when I talk about qualitative metrics, I simplify it even more, and I say the ability to measure the quality of something. Okay. And so when you take a look on how you do this, there's a ton of maturity models out there, right? The one that we use at LAI for behaviors is what we call a stage resilience model, right? It evaluates how resilient your organization is in maintaining critical behaviors when you're under pressure, right? Is your team going to revert back to old habits, right, under the stress, or are they so embedded, these behaviors, in your organization that they hold strong under times of very high stress, right? So this model looks like from left to right. So the first one is reactive, right? So things are inconsistent. We do things differently all the time, right? Very ad hoc. And a lot of the behaviors reinforce the dysfunction, right? For example, we don't make decisions quickly, right? The second one is aware, right? Recognizing, like, listen, we need to make decisions. We recognize that we're not good at this, okay? And we need to figure it out. That's really that awareness stage. Structured is, okay, we've We have a hypothesis. We've formulated an experiment. We believe we have defined a good starting point that will always evolve, right? But we have something in place and we need to start to optimize that. Adaptive is now we are starting to be consistent. They're coordinated. They feel like something we do every day. And then ultimately the nirvana is this is so ingrained, this behavior, as part of your culture. It allows us to be proactive and very, very resilient. So this is a stage resilience model. It's been influenced by many of the different stage resilience models out there. And ultimately, what this allows you to do is measure those behaviors in a relatively simple fashion. So if I give you an example for, right, everyone talks about psychological safety. We're all familiar with the Google study that this was one of the biggest attributes to a high performing team. And so when we measure psychological safety, we want to understand, do people feel safe to challenge ideas, to admit mistakes, share concerns up front, right? That transparency ultimately leads to identifying problems early, right? And speeding up and learning, right? So it contributes to the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, right? And now you have this 5-stage process, okay? 5-stage maturity model that allows you to ultimately measure where your team is at. And maybe you roll up those results to say where your organization is at. You start to now identify patterns. Where are our weaknesses? Where can we deploy transformation leaders to help? Right. So it starts to drive those conversations. And ultimately, that's what we're after here, is the driving of conversation. So finally, to wrap up this section, the benefits of qualitative metrics, right? It's going to help us understand the complex part of transformation, and that's the human and cultural aspects, okay? It's going to bring that invisible part of transformations. It's going to help shine the light on that. It's also going to provide context on why things are happening, right? When you depend solely on a quantitative measure, let's say cycle time, it does a really good job at explaining what's going on and what the result is of the system. However, it doesn't necessarily explain why things are happening. And so from a transformation perspective, you need that context, especially within large organizations that are extremely complex. What insights can you glean that ultimately allow you to act earlier and not necessarily wait for failure? And then finally, that acting early, that's what we call a leading indicator. Okay, right? Are we moving in the right direction towards our outcomes? What are those indicators that are going to allow us that we can collect fairly easily? And it's going to signal, are we moving in the right direction? Or do we have frictions in the system, right, that are going to impede us from achieving our goal? Okay, right. And so Bob's going to get into how you can use both lagging and leading indicators together, right, to ultimately have more of a comprehensive approach and give you a fighting chance when it comes to transformation.
Thanks so much, Mike. Perfect. Let me share my screen here if you were to stop sharing.
Oh yeah, sure.
Nice. Perfect. So I've got a few interesting slides. And these were fun to put together. And first off, just to kind of give us a view of where the problem space is, right, as well as the benefits of leading indicators, which we'll get to in a moment. Mike hinted at this a bit ago. The majority of organizations are really heavily dependent on lagging indicators, and it's great, right? They are very helpful, and one of the biggest lagging indicators is, are organizations making money? What is our stock price doing? How are we surviving as an organization? Can we pay people, right? Are we having to dig into savings to pay healthcare costs, et cetera? I mean, those are Those are pretty real world but lagging indicators to show if the goal has been achieved. And so we are obviously the thrust or the focus of our session today is to get people to start thinking about leading indicators as a necessary part of the overall picture. These provide early signals on the process, right, on the progress toward the outcome. It's also interesting is that these require system and process understanding. It's actually great to see in the list of attendees for our session today, a lot of folks who know kind of how transformations work, right? They know that a specific, let's call it a behavior or an activity, is going to likely create some sort of other outcome. There is an interesting nuance here that is valuable to understand, which is that a lot of lagging indicators are quantitative in nature. I talked about that in terms of profitability and kind of the cold harsh reality that a lot of for-profit businesses are beholden either to earnings or shareholder value, et cetera. But those leading indicators, they're squishy. There's the reason why. Well, I'd like to think that AI is not going to come for all of our at least coaching jobs or transformation. It's because there is that the need to assess things that, to Mike's earlier point about qualitative metrics, whether there's the quality of thing or non-numerical metrics, they're difficult to directly measure because they're qualitative. I'm going to run through a quick example here. So let's say something completely out of the technology space. We're growing corn. And the lagging indicator that we're looking at is how much corn, how many bushels of corn we're going to get out of the field. Well, we can look at that at the very end of the growing cycle where nothing can be done. And all the combines are shut off, the corn's at market. That's a great metric. The yes and is that the leading metrics that we could look at that are quantitative, right, might be how much nitrogen we put on the soil, when we plant. But let's switch this a little bit. Let's say that the lagging indicator is instead the profit. We want to make the most amount of money by selling that corn. We need to look at leading indicators that are probably more qualitative in nature, which are, do we have the right agreements in place with the right people? Have we reached out to all of the individuals who are going to help us grow that corn? The whole picture is necessary. And by the way, I do not farm corn. I think I can fake it well enough for a webinar. But the whole point is that the whole picture, right? We don't want to wait until the very end to get us to the outcome that we want. We really need to lean in on those leading indicators. So we put together some fun slides to think about what organizations really want. Using my mouse here, what lagging indicators are often looked at. Mike talked about cycle time, right? But if there is a leading indicator, what are the behaviors that lead to speed, right? It's the maturity of the behaviors at the team level. It's decision making, it's collaboration, it's transparency. It's those pieces that are going to lead to better speed. Waiting until cycle time as a lagging indicator is often too late. So let's say that reliability and adaptability are what your leadership is asking for. You've already can solve for the technology and the process pieces, but what are those behaviors that will lead you to those business outcomes? Well, oftentimes we're looking at the lagging indicators are defect counts. How many bugs effectively enter production? That's the corn's already at market, right? If we can look instead at behaviors that are qualitative, like the number of integrations for code, do your devs or do your testers, are they skipping those steps? Focusing on those, that's where it will take the expertise of the coaches and the transformation agents and the leaders on this call to understand what's happening in that organization, and then to establish at least a picture of what good looks like for the behaviors that are leading to those desired outcomes. Another one is predictability. A lagging indicator could be burn down charts. Again, right? That's the end. But what about your DevOps practices? What do your teams think about in terms of the definition of ready, right? What kind of handoffs are happening? What are the initial stages that get you to those places. And then the final one that I think is really cool is innovation, right? A typical lagging indicator is return on investment. That is, I mean, innovation is putting the seed in the ground, and ROI is all the way at the end, getting, is people eating the corn, right? But what are the pieces in those early stages? What are the mindsets? How do you foster an idea? You can't weigh those, you can't like measure that. Like it's almost like asking how much does an idea weigh, right? Instead, we need to lean in on what are the practices. Mike said it before with psychological safety. If there's no safety, I'm not going to come with any ideas, because if I bring those up, and even if there's a tiny aspect of failure in that idea, then there's strong disincentive for me to innovate, to bring better ideas to market. So Mike, I'll give you control here and let you take us through the next few slides.
Bob, it's not moving for me. Can you just go to the next slide? There's only 3.
Oh, I see that. Huh. Yeah, totally.
Perfect. All right. So from the behavioral aspect, we've talked a lot about the value of measuring behaviors, right? And you can do this in any tool. You can write your own assessment. You can do it in Excel. Obviously, we're showing our platform here, which is LAI. And I just want to point out kind of the insights that you can glean from this type of qualitative assessment of behaviors, right? First of all, you can categorize those behaviors into those 3 levers: people, process, technology. You can also start to talk about the trends, right? We know that it's not necessarily about the absolute numbers. Instead, are we moving in the right direction? What patterns do we see within the data, right? And ultimately, this is going to show us where are we at current state. It is going to give us a data point to have a conversation, okay? I would say the most powerful part of these is when you roll them up across different groups and teams, and you're able to see that system level view, because we all know that culture is driven and shaped by the system in and of itself. And so as you start to aggregate and roll up this information, it becomes incredibly powerful to be able to point out the frictions within the system that ultimately would be either helping or impeding achieving those outcomes, right? Or, identifying, hey, we're moving in the right direction. These behaviors seem to be being adopted, right? And we're making right decisions. So that is really what we're talking about. Whenever you have an assessment, you want to use that data and that data set to have a conversation, right? Because it's invisible, right? This ultimately lets it be visible. It's very complex, so let's have a reference point to talk to, and then figure out what to do next. Bob, can you go to the next slide? So ultimately, what do you do with these results? It's going to help you answer some questions that a lot of times we all struggle with as change agents. One, what behavioral patterns are emerging, right? What type of adoption are we seeing? Are they going to impede our outcomes? Or are they going to help fuel it? Okay. What correlations do we see with the quantitative metrics? This is where it gets really, really powerful. Okay. Maybe we're seeing that our throughput is down. And I keep leaning on that decision making, and prioritization is another great example, right? What are we seeing? What can we do that provides us this information early and upfront to actually help us pull those levers, right, early in the process, so that we have a better chance of succeeding from a transformational outcome perspective? Okay. Where do we need to deploy our help? Who needs coaching? Who needs training? Who needs just help, adopting these behaviors? Ultimately, what do we tackle at scale, right? So those patterns of that rolled up data. And as we know, all systems and all organizations are unique, right? If there's one thing we've learned in the last 24 years, it's not one size fits all, okay? And so what experiments can be run to ultimately resolve the issue? So in summary, we've seen that a lot of the research, right? And I think we know this. We've seen this in organizations. I know I have, right? A lot of the frictions that you see in these transformations are caused by behaviors not aligning to that new way of working. Okay. Um, to overcome this challenge, okay, because behaviors, one of the reasons is they're invincible, right? They can't be seen. They're under the surface. So we have to make them visible. Okay. And what's interesting about this is you can actually measure behaviors, okay, using a maturity model, a resilience maturity model. And ultimately that results in qualitative metrics that can serve now as those leading indicators, help you provide some context, get some insights, and are we moving towards the goal, right? And then put that next to the quantitative metrics that gives you that comprehensive view of are we moving the needle? That's what we're trying to do. Are we achieving our outcomes? And if not, why? How do we work backwards? What experiments do we run? So that's what this is all about. We're trying to help you surface uh, the complexity, right? Simplify it, give you a data point to talk to drive conversation, and allow you to get out in front of some of this.
And Mike, that is the most perfect segue for this offer. So, guys and gals, we put together these slides, or at least the idea for this webinar, a couple of weeks ago. And between that point and today, we had one of our large customers ask us for support in literally the same topic. And we were able to put together a pretty amazing template of questions. And when I say template, I mean the ability to assess the behavior within your organization. We wanted to offer that. Like, we realized that we can offer this as part of the trial for LAI to folks who are attending this session. So this is not a shoot me an email and get access for this whole thing. I'd love to have a quick conversation with you. And so to that end, I've put my meeting link into the chat. And feel free to use it, grab 30 minutes of time, and we can talk through how this might work in your context and what larger goals you'd like to achieve. So that said, I'm going to move through to the next couple of slides here. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully this was valuable. I saw really great comments and thoughts in the chat. We'd love to know what's next for you folks. And so I'm going to give you this link into the chat. And if folks could click on that and then tell us which of these 4 topics, Gen AI, readiness and maturity, real world, slight typo there, but real world LAI success stories. Kate, thank you so much for attending. LAI is Lean Agile Intelligence. That is our platform that allows you to easily assess behavioral data, as well as quantitative and qualitative indicators for the success of transformations. It looks at individuals, teams, and organizations to help support real, lasting, and sustainable change. So on that front, if you guys could, no worries, Kate, and if you could click into this poll, and I don't know if I can see the results of this poll here, Mike, or if I need to myself pull open the, I'm going to turn off your remote control. Mike, please just, let's see. Okay, so we will gather these in a moment, but as we conclude here, big thank you for everybody for attending. Thanks for listening to Mike and I riff on a topic. You can tell that a lot of this is unscripted. This is the stuff that we solve every single day for our customers. It's also points of passion for us as professionals and change agents within a space that I think we all love. You guys have my meeting link. Grab some time, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully we ran through those learning objectives, meaning the causes of failures for transformation, which shockingly are behaviors, and then how to use qualitative metrics to pull that needle left and to shift your thinking left. Um, yeah, here's some highlights. I'll let your eyes dance over this. And then, guys and gals, thanks so much for staying on mute and off video. If you have any questions, let's go live, and I'll stop sharing here, and let's us see some people's faces and answer anything real time. And you're welcome, Marcus. And if it's still Tuesday morning and you're still pre-coffee, if you want to drop your question into the chat, we'll take it there as well. That's how comprehensive our talk track was, Mike. We nailed it. So,
Winner. Yep, for sure.
Kate, thanks for the kind words. I'm glad to hear that this was useful. Hey, if you want, final thing is before you boogie, if you do want the slides, let me give you my email address, and I'm happy to share the slides and the recording. Intelligence, see. Have you encountered resistance to accepting the actual findings from the assessments that you ran? Mike, that's a great question from Peter Popov.
Yeah, and the answer is sure, right? Sometimes you are going to have that resistance. It's all about the mindset of the leaders. Are they, really, I would say, good leaders would want this data to help provide and inform decisions from an improvement perspective, right? To start to surface some of those issues that aren't seen and aren't tangible. So it really comes down to the leader, right? Is it something that they want, or is it something that there's always a change management aspect here too, where they need to understand the why, right? So I think as you orchestrate as a change agent, you navigate, right, and you do that change management, having everyone understands what were we trying to achieve here and why. Ultimately, you can get there where this is accepted, okay? But there could be some mindset shifts that may take some time.
Great answer. I'm going to backstop that, Mike, which is really emphasizing leader priorities. And this reminds me of a webinar we did 2 or 3 weeks ago about in the title of the webinar was a bit provocative. It was, is Agile dead? Or really is that question irrelevant? And we backed into the idea that agility has never been the goal. It's never been the destination. It's really just in service of leader priorities. And so with that as an intro, I'm going to drop that link to that webinar. It's on our YouTube channel. I'll drop that into the chat here. In Peter, this is a way to say that as long as you are hitting, whether it's a stated objective or an unspoken priority for a leader, yeah, you might hit resistance, but I think about leaders as a embodification, to use a word, of an organization's priorities. And so if you're hitting those priorities and you know which one to tap into, then you should be able to, with help, clear out that resistance. So, oh, I love it. Real life example from a client of mine. You are not allowed to run Sonar Cube on our code base to measure tech debt because it will likely get the product canceled. Oh, at least to commiserate. I think you have you're among peers and friends here. Boy, that's a tricky one. I don't know if we can solve that in the remaining 13 minutes of our time box. The yes and is um, somebody cares about tech debt somewhere. You just got to find those folks, raise that flag, and do so in a way that maintains employment. With whom do you actually do the assessment? With team members and management, et cetera? From Patrick, great question. It is from everybody, um, from those who are in the system. You can look at it from a team by team basis, on a departmental basis, on an individual basis. Mike, what am I missing there?
No, that coincides with another question was, who is your target audience? And that's what I was thinking was, this is a feedback mechanism, right? It's the ability to actually capture and structure feedback in an actionable way. And you guys know as well as I do, the people on the ground floor know best, right? The people closest to the work can give you probably the most honest answers, right? Or the best answers, I should say. And so it's really important to get their feedback, as well as having everyone within the system, like Bob said, to be able to identify those patterns, and do that.
And the Patrick, the next question that we typically get is how long does this take, right? It really depends on the depth of the assessment. There is somebody on this call who has implemented very fast assessments slash surveys within LAI that take even just a few minutes. And Marcus, thanks so much for joining us and going into your evening to hang out. It was nice to get connected. So again, the duration here is really to the depth of your interest. And the other thing is many folks are using LAI as part of their retrospectives. It is not just a link that gets sent out and maybe answered, but instead forms an integral part of an organization's efforts to improve, call it an inspect and adapt, or retrospective, etc. And those assessments themselves serve as kind of a spur or inspires conversation about what folks are observing. There's a whole bunch of other stuff about LAI that we don't have time to. It's not within scope to talk about today. But that's, again, grab time with me and we can talk about how it can help the transformation in your context. You're welcome, Patrick. Thank you for your great questions. And so I'm going to drop my meeting link one more time. If you want that free behavioral assessment, that template that we put together for our large customer, grab time with me. I actually already got a meeting invite, so I'm flattered, I'm honored to that this was of value. And let's give this kind of one last call for any additional questions as we wrap up our session.
Going once.
Mike, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks for your partnership. Thanks especially to Prima Jenkins, who put together an amazing slide deck for us to present from. And thanks again to all the folks who joined and stuck around for both our presentation and then great Q&A at the end. Good luck, everybody. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.